Listen, y'all, the Ravens, they just did what we honestly thought wasn't even possible. At least for me. I didn't think it was going to happen. I didn't think this was coming, but the Ravens did the unthinkable. We got to talk about it. Y'all know what it is. Let's have this conversation. Let's go. All right, y'all. Shocking news out of Baltimore. The end of the road for John Harbaugh is here, and the former Baltimore Ravens coach now is out as head coach. John Harbaugh, after man, a crazy run, right? Like a crazy run, a legendary run, a run that had its ups and it had its downs. John Harbaugh is out, y'all. John Harbaugh is out, and honestly, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. When I first heard the news, and I think this is the way of social media at this point, right? When I first heard the news, I had to go and confirm it, right? Because we're in the era of trolling. We're in the era of kind of just phoniness and fakeness and AI, and anything can come out at any time. So when I first saw it, I was like, like I think I verbally gasped, and then I had to make sure it was true. So I looked on Twitter, see who was reporting it. The Ravens hadn't put out a statement yet. That was not something that had happened, but the a lot of I think Schefter was the first one to put something out. A lot of the insiders were putting out the rumor that John Harbaugh was done, or the statement was out as Baltimore Ravens head coach. So it was very vague in terms of was he out for because he wanted to be out mutually, or was it Bisciotti's call? Later on, we were learning a statement given by Steve Bisciotti that it was Steve Bisciotti's call. So they had a conversation, they talked. I think Harbaugh got a chance to lay out what he felt, and Bisciotti said, I don't know if it's gonna, I think we've done some great things together. You brought us a lot of success. I personally think John Harbaugh is a Hall of Famer. I think he'll be in the Hall of Fame, and that's it, right? Like I think it's the end of the road for you here. The report is there's 7-8 calls out there for John Harbaugh services right now. Not surprised by that. He's been successful in the league. That's not surprising. But I am surprised. I think this is one of the most consequential moments in Baltimore Ravens history. And the offseason leading up to it, what they do with it, this is going to be one of the biggest offseasons for the Baltimore Ravens, if not the big. Honestly, I'm going to say this right now. This is the biggest offseason for the Baltimore Ravens in Ravens history, right? In terms of who they pick as their head coach, who he puts around him, and what that means. And I think, I said this, it's funny. I have this group chat, and then, kind of a, best friends group chat. And we talk about sports all the time. And it's funny. I made a statement. I'm like, I think the Ravens are closer to winning the Super Bowl now than they were with John Harbaugh. And my friend kind of joked back at me, and he was like, they don't even know who the coach is going to be yet. And I'm like, well, pending that, I think if they hire the right guy, I think a Super Bowl could be on the way. Because obviously the Ravens have been there, right? They've been right there. They've been right there, and we've seen it, right? We have seen how close they were, and I talked about it last year when I put out a video talking about how John Harbaugh, after the loss last year against Buffalo, I was like, John Harbaugh will not get fired. It's not going to happen. Why John Harbaugh will not be fired, at least for that offseason at that time, because I'm like, you're so close. The year before, AFC Championship game, right? AFC Championship game. If you don't fumble, you're one possession away from winning that football game against the defending champs at the time, right? So there's chances there, right? Even it's funny. The Tyler Loop situation brought a bunch of heartbreak back for Baltimore Ravens fans over the past couple of days. And it's like, it's one of those situations where it's like I said as an owner, as a suit and tie guy, I don't know if you can justify firing John Harbaugh at that time based off of what you had just seen. This year was a little bit different. You start off 1-5, you go on a little bit of a run, you tail off at the end of the year, and you lose by a last second kick, but you lost games in similar ways over and over and over again. You just did. You just did. You just did. Shout out to my guy, Brandon Bazell, back again. Look, I appreciate you as always, and my other live viewers as well. No, I'm not a coach. It's just an athletic shirt. Maybe one day we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Hey man, we lost the steal, and it's really sad. You think so? So, and Nick, let me know. Let me know down below. Let me know. Honestly, all of y'all, let me know what y'all really thought of John Harbaugh, because I'm gonna tell my story about John Harbaugh, and then obviously if y'all want to chime in, feel free. But I think for me, and I'm gonna be honest with you, because I know I have been hard on Harbaugh the past couple years. I just have, right? I've been hard on John Harbaugh ever since I always bring up the moment between me and Hendo where I kind of woke up on John Harbaugh, right? And I've been hard on John Harbaugh ever since, right? Because we've been losing games in the same ways. It doesn't really make sense. He never really felt like he had control of the team, especially later in his tenure here, right? And for me, it's kind of bittersweet. I'm just gonna be honest. I told you we lose, and we're winners. Hearts will be gone. I just didn't. And I'm gonna tell my story in a second, but I just didn't feel like they would pull the trigger on it. Even today I was shocked, right? Even today I was shocked to see that they actually did it, because it's one of those situations where I think you kind of get comfortable, right? You kind of get comfortable with what you got. You're talking about you got an MVP QB who brings so many eyes to the Baltimore Ravens, and like I said, I'm talking from my owner's perspective. Never owned a team. I'm just putting my hat on real quick, but put my suit on, I guess I should say. But it's like, you got winning season after winning season. You got number one seeds. You got an MVP quarterback. You got a elite level defense. You got, for the most part, elite level special teams, right? Like, everything looks decent. So I just didn't think they would pull the trigger. And that's, and when I made that video last year, I felt the same way. I felt the same way, but I was a little more confident that they wouldn't, like I said, once it started getting a little bit of steam in the mainstream media on the 4-letter networks, once it started getting attention there by kind of those type of higher ups, for lack of a better term, once it started getting their attention, then I think, as Ravens content creators, I think we kind of knew, like, we mentioned something and it finally got to them, right? Because, they just kind of started to see the writing on the wall. But honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't see them making this move for the simple fact of, like I said, you kind of just get complacent. You kind of just get comfortable, right? Like, you're having winning season. You got, like I said, I broke down all the things, right? You have all these successful things going on. And in the media, the story is, hey, this guy, he's disciplined, right? He's got faith on his side. He's got this, that, you start to hear these things like, it's the Ravens way, like, play like a Raven. The media fed into that too, right? The media fed into the same thing. So Brandon said, Harb's got blessed with a team. He is mediocre, and Lamar has been saving him. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, right? And this is my opinion on Harbs, because like I said, it's bittersweet for me. It's bittersweet for me. I wanted him gone. I did. Because I was just ready for something new. I've been a Ravens fan probably since 2005, I would say. When I could, actually remember football a little bit. Like I got way into it in 2008. Right about the time Harbaugh came around. Right, I think that was the year Harbaugh came around, if I'm not mistaken. Right, I got really into it when Joe Flacco was drafted, and kind of the new regime. I just got I finally could truly understand football, understand what was going on. So I kind of, in my football journey, I grew up with John Harbaugh, right? So like I said, that's why I've always been a little bit biased to John Harbaugh, especially early in my content creation career, because I'm like, hey, I grew up with this guy. So that's what I said. It's a little bit bittersweet. Like, who's got, back then, I'm talking about back then, Who's got it better than us, right? Him punching at the screen after a Steelers game, right? Like, even just kind of the Belichickian way that he had of answering certain things. I'm talking about back then, right? I'm talking about back then. It was all strategic. It was all strategic, right? That's when I loved John Harbaugh. I did like that. That was my guy back then, right? Back then. This is Joe Flacco era. And also you got to remember Joe Flacco. They didn't bring a lot of talent around him either. I think Joe Flacco could have been a far better quarterback historically if they didn't do the same things with Joe Flacco as they are currently doing with Lamar. And when I really saw it, like I said, shout out to Hendo hanging out with us as well. But look, when I really started to take note of what was going on was when Hendo pressed me about it. What was that? Probably 4 years ago now. We were doing a season preview, and Hendo pressed me. He was like, "Why do you think Harbaugh was a good coach?" And I couldn't answer it. I literally was stopped in my tracks. I could not answer it. And I really had to think about it. And like I said, shout out to Hendo and some of the other Ravens content creators out there. Lunch Break Hot Tag and Sip to How has said some of these things as well, and the guys on his show. Shout out to them for mentioning it and just bringing it up, right? Just bringing it up, because it's like, why are we losing in the same ways? Why does it feel like this message is going stale? Then you think about the mutiny in 2012, right? You think about that. You think about the reports of that, and it's like, something's not right, right? Something's not right, and we keep losing. And especially if we want to talk about the last 8 years, really, we keep losing games in the same ways. We keep losing to the same teams, right? You want to talk about the Chiefs? You want to talk about the Bills? We can't beat either one of those teams when it matters. We for darn sure can't beat the Steelers when it matters. And honestly, the Browns and the Bengals, we have at least one game where we have fits against them. And then there's a couple of games that just we have no business losing. And that goes back to preparation. And I just feel like the preparation aspect of the game was not there for John Harbaugh anymore, right? It was not there for John Harbaugh anymore. It had passed him by. The preparation part of the game just had passed him by. The guys were not ready to play in a lot of times. And to me, I know you can't, the act of a turnover, you can't blame on the coach because the player made the mistake. But if you turn the football over the same way over and over and over again, that goes back to coaching to me. Because in practice, when Zay Flowers is running free, somebody should be chasing after him, punching out the ball every single time, or at least trying to. That's good coaching to me, right? And like I said, I think I had kind of gotten fed up with Harbaugh because he was a little bit nonchalant. He was a little bit nonchalant. He was a little bit like, it wasn't that he didn't have the passion for it anymore, but it was just kind of like, everybody's to blame but me, right? Greg Roman's to blame. Zach Orr's to blame. Todd Monken's to blame. But what about the guy who makes the calls, right? The guy who hires certain guys, right? What about the guy who seems like he doesn't hire guys who are going to challenge him? Doesn't keep players on the team that's going to challenge him? That's a problem. Yes, you want to be a leader of the team. And it might just be old school mentality, right? But you want to be a leader of the team. You want to be a leader of these, of these men, some of the best athletes in the world. But you have to be that leader. And I think that was lost. Like, I think early, honestly, I really do. I think early in his career when the Ravens were winning playoff games as an underdog. Now, I think there was some good stuff happening, but I also think that, there were Hall of Fame players on those teams, right? There were, he's got a Hall of Fame quarterback right now, right? He's got a Hall of Fame running back right now, right? Like, the pieces, when it comes to putting the pieces together, right? Derrick Henry is great, no matter who the coach is. Lamar Jackson is great, no matter who the coach is, right? When it comes to putting the rest of the pieces together, we talking about a wide receiver room or putting a coach who puts a wide receiver room together. When you're talking about an offensive line, when you're talking about the fact that you haven't had a pass rush since Matt Judon left, I don't know, 5 years ago, that's a problem to me, right? And that starts with the guy at the top. And here's the thing. The other thing about this for me too is this is the reset button. This is the reset button, right? Because yes, you may, I've heard rumors about you possibly, because I know Todd Monken is having head coach offers, so he might not, he might not be around. Also, Zach Orr, right? I've heard Zach Orr may possibly stay, but in my opinion, I feel like if you have a new head coach, they probably gonna want to hire their own guys in a lot of occasions, right? A lot of people gonna want to hire their own guys, the guys that they know is gonna be there. Let me look real quick. Luke make that kick. Luke makes that kick. Shout to Sage. Luke makes that kick. He keeps his job. This will most likely set the organization back at least a few years. Honestly, I don't think it will. So if it's funny. People have been kind of funny about this, but I think Luke missing that kick saved this franchise probably 5 years, right? I think it saves this franchise 5 years. Let me tell you why. To me, Luke missing the kick and Harbaugh ends up going because of it, right? If that happens, right? If in the situation because that's what happened, right? If Harbaugh keeps his job, we see more of the same. What and Sage, I'll ask this directly to you and for everybody watching as well. What have you seen from this team over the past probably about 8 years? And especially if we want to talk about last season in particular, right? The last 2 seasons in particular. What have you seen from this team that makes you feel like continuing in the same way would have been good, right? We don't show up in the playoffs. We don't show up for some of our bigger games, especially as of late. Why would you feel like we should continue to go in that same direction? You said you said this will most likely set the organization back at least a few years. And honestly, I think that's valid. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think that's valid. My opinion, if they get the right coach, this will set the organization back just 1 year. Just 1 year. Because because it's the whole rookie coach, new system aspect, right? It's the rookie coach, new system aspect. I think if they hire the right coach, they will still be really good next year, but they just won't quite be ready because it's a new system. And then so next year will be semi-wash, right? And then the year after that will be exactly what we've been waiting for. I think. That's just my opinion. I think. I'm ready for my star. Look, I'm gonna have to invite you on for real because you a real one. I'm gonna have to invite you on. We have to have this conversation. We look. The invitation is out there. Okay, I'm putting it out there on the record. His pressers told me he didn't have much passion. The same speak for you. I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I feel like it's been kind of like we said, it's been the same message. And you said it right. It's been the same. It's been the same message, and there's never really been any improvement, right? Because how do you lose in the same ways, but there's no improvement? Like the first time I realized that Zay Flowers, had a fumbling problem, I would have been on him, right? Like I would have been like, hey, like we gonna work through this. We gonna have in practice people running at you from all types of different directions, and you got to hang on to the football because I feel like, if I'm not mistaken, let me know if I'm wrong, but something tells me Derrick Henry had a fumbling problem like his rookie to second year, and they nipped that in the bud real quick. They said, hey, we gonna throw everything at you, and you gonna hang on to this football, and for the most part, that's what he does. For the most part, that's exactly what he does. Our start the last 2 years says we are late for. Yeah, yeah, and I mean even the end of our seasons, right? I think say the same thing. The end of our seasons say the same thing. The end of our seasons in the same ways. It would be different if like, dude, I mean, you competing with every team and they're just better than you, right? That would be different, right? Honestly, that's semi how it was early in the Greg Roman years when you didn't really have receivers, right? It was similar to that. But lately, you've had the guys. You've had the guys you needed, and you have not gotten the job done. And like we talked about before, the fact that you trotted out Daniel Faalele out there for 2 straight seasons is crazy work to me. Crazy work to me. Keaton Mitchell could fumble one time and he would never see the field for 6 games. So why is it that Faalele can miss every block? Emory Jones Jr. can come in the game we just watched. Emory Jones Jr. can come in, play serviceably, and we don't get any consistency with that. I don't get it. That's just me. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. And he stopped taking shots at people at the end of the bar. He's tired. I mean, yeah, I think the end of the bar comment frustrated a lot of people. He kind of got to that point where it was like, I am untouchable, right? I'm bulletproof, to a certain degree. And I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to believe that he is that way per se, but I mean, his words said that, right? Like, these guys just at the end of the bar. I know what I'm talking about, right? But also, it's like, and this is kind of an issue that I have with a lot of people, not just John Harbaugh. The idea that the people at the end of the bar, the idea that the people at the end of the bar, or the people with these microphones, or the people who are on YouTube, or the people who follow these teams, like it is their everyday job, right? That we don't know anything, right? I think that's crazy. I think that's crazy work. Hendo, Brandon, anybody in this chat really that probably follow the Ravens like we do. Like, I think it's crazy to think that we don't know what we truly see, right? I give respect to the coaches and what they do day in and day out, but to act like and I feel like, honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you, I feel like sometimes analysts do the same thing. They act like analysts / journalists, they do the same thing. They act like the guys who are content creators, they can't know possibly more than I know, because I talk about this every day. But it's like, I don't know if this conversation is even being had. Like I said, shout out to Hendo again. I don't know if the conversation is even being had without Hendo and LBHT Show and those guys, right? Like, Sip the Tally and those guys. I just don't. I don't know if we're having this conversation today if they don't bring it up, saying like, hey, like, something's up, right? Something is going on. Something is going on. A conversation must be had. Why are we losing in the same ways over and over again? It's just how it is. So, and make sure you subscribe to Rogue Pod as well, and Yolanda B as well. But look, I'm telling y'all, like, for somebody who was so frustrated just a couple days ago, I think this does give like new life to the Ravens. Like I said, it's bittersweet to a certain degree, because, like I said, I grew up with John Harbaugh to a certain degree. When I really truly knew football, I only knew it the way John Harbaugh did it. And he was coaching my favorite team, and I was a little bit biased to my favorite team, no matter how they lost at those times. Now I don't have to be necessarily as biased. I'm positive. I'm not necessarily as biased, but I just think, I just think, it was a good run. Like I said, I think, he'll be a Hall of Famer. He'll probably still go down as the greatest Ravens head coach of all time until somebody takes that spot from him, which I'm hoping the next guy that they bring in, I'm hoping he picks up right where John Harbaugh left off and surpasses it. Right. I really do. I think, if they make the right decision, I still think, going back to something I said years ago when Lamar Jackson first signed, I still think that's a dynasty making decision. I just do. Now it's part 2 of that, right? It's part 2 of that, because we've been right there, right? This is part 2 of that. Signing Lamar Jackson and the subsequent probably re-sign that we're hoping to see now. But signing Lamar Jackson, dynasty making decision, right? Dynasty defining decision right there. And we've seen what Lamar Jackson can do, and we've seen the magic he can make. So now, if you put the right coach with him, that's part 2 of that dynasty making decision. That's part 2 of creating what we've all been waiting for this team. And that's not just one Super Bowl. That's multiple Super Bowls. Now I get it. Lamar Jackson's getting older. Understand that. But I think if you shore up this offensive line, I think we'll be surprised at how much, how great Lamar can be. We haven't seen Lamar with a great offensive line yet. The jury's still out on the receivers, right? I think, like I said, I like Zay, I like Bate, but you never have too many, right? So there's that. But I think if they share up the offensive line, honestly, I think if they share up the offensive line with the core they got right now, I think things will be fine. Shore up the offensive line, get this pass rush going. We'll see how it goes. But look, y'all, let me know down below because I'm kind of curious to see what you guys think in terms of not only John Harbaugh being out as Baltimore Ravens head coach, but also who y'all think is going to be the head coach. Who, I'll give y'all twofold. Who do y'all think is going to be, and who do y'all want it to be? Right? If you were with a guy in the room saying, "Hey, if you had to meet the guy at the end of the bar and say, "Hey, we got to talk. I got to hire you as my new head coach." Who would it be? Brian Flores, Clint Kubiak. Who would it be? Who Raheem Morris? I've heard that name come out. Who would it be for you? I'm leaning towards Flores. I feel like I really am. I'm leaning towards Flores because I think Flores will make sure the defense is as it should be, similar to a guy like Mike McDonald, and I think he'll let his offensive coordinator handle business. That's what I'm thinking. I'm not opposed to an offensive coach. But at the same time, I know how the Ravens are, right? The Ravens are defensive minded, and maybe they won't be as much anymore, right? With a new head coach, but I know the Ravens are kind of defensive minded, so I wouldn't be surprised if they went for a defensive head coach. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, y'all. But if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for me down below. Look, y'all, definitely hope you guys enjoyed this show. I'm gonna get up out of here. Definitely appreciate y'all as always. Shout out to all my live viewers hanging out with me as usual. But look, y'all, I'm gonna get up out of here. Definitely hope you guys enjoyed the show. This has been the Be More Show. Look, y'all, John Harbaugh is out. A new coach coming soon.